Hello everyone. Today we will learn about what is called Clinical Decision Support Systems, or the CDSS. This is one of the most important concepts related to artificial intelligence in the medical and clinical fields. Because for healthcare and medical affairs, it is all about the clinical decision. How the clinical decision is being made today and how it will be in the future, and what information exactly can influence that clinical decision. The name Clinical Decision Support Systems sounds very technical at first, but the idea behind it is actually very simple. A clinical decision support system is not one specific software, and it is not a single technology. It's another concept and a way of thinking about how technology can support the clinical decisions. Clinical decision support systems exist to answer a very practical question. Given the information that we have about a patient right now, what should the healthcare professional consider? That is all. It doesn't make the decision, and it doesn't replace the clinician. It supports thinking, attention, and awareness at the moment decisions are being made. So, to understand the clinical decision support systems clearly, it helps to separate two things. First, the concept of the clinical decision support, and second, the systems that implement that concept. The concept comes first. It's any tool, any software, any algorithm that helps a healthcare professional or a clinician to notice something important. This is considered a form of clinical decision support system. And some tools used in clinical decision support systems are very simple. For example, a basic alert that says that a patient is allergic to a certain medication that has just been prescribed. Other tools are more advanced, using artificial intelligence to analyze patterns across thousands of patients. But regardless of how advanced the technology that is used, the role of the clinical decision support system remains the same. It supports the decision making, but it doesn't own the decision. Now let's make this more practical. In real clinical environments, clinicians deal with enormous amounts of information. That includes lab results, imaging, medications, medical history, guidelines, and any evolving evidence. No human being can process all of this information perfectly all the time. So, a clinical decision support system can monitor patient data in the background and highlight something that deserves attention. It can remind, it can give alerts, it can suggest, but it will always depend on the human judgment and the human decision making. Imagine a clinician prescribing a medication. The clinical decision support system may generate an alert, for example, saying that this drug could interact with another medication the patient is already taking. Here, the alert doesn't mean don't prescribe the drug. It means pause and review. And so the physician will pause and review, and either will ignore the alert or will consider it and take different action. But the clinical decision support system itself doesn't make any clinical decision. It is just drawing attention to a potential issue that the clinician should evaluate. That distinction is extremely important. Now let's look at another example, and this time let's use a more advanced clinical decision support system. For example, in one hospital, the system tools monitor patients' vital signs, lab results, and clinical notes to identify early signs of sepsis. The system here may flag that the patient is at high risk of sepsis before any symptoms appear. When a clinician will see that alert, it doesn't mean that the patient has sepsis. It means that the system has identified a pattern that, based on previous data, was often associated with sepsis. So now it's alerting the physician. This alert is a signal, not a diagnosis. The clinician will still assess the patient, review the data, and decides what action, if any, needs to be taken. This is how clinical decision support systems work. Now, let's translate this thinking into a medical affairs context. Because in medical affairs, we do not prescribe treatments. We interact closely with scientific data and clinical decision-making environments, and so understanding clinical decision support systems helps us to speak the same language as clinicians and digital teams. This is number one. Also, it helps us interpret outputs without overestimating what those outputs mean. Additionally, a clinical decision support system might analyze large volumes of clinical literature and guidelines and highlight updates relevant to specific disease areas. If such a system flags a new guideline recommendation, it doesn't mean that a recommendation is automatically applicable in every single country. What it means is that new evidence exists and deserves to be reviewed, to be discussed, and to be interpreted properly. From a medical affairs perspective, this output can support scientific exchange, education, and further internal alignments. But again, even if these systems are used in medical affairs, the system is supporting awareness and not replacing the scientific expertise in medical affairs. Another good example, I think, would be using such systems, a clinical decision support system, in safety signal detection. Because here the system can scan adverse event reports, real-world data, and flag any potential pattern that requires further evaluation. And again, that flag here doesn't confirm any safety issue. It indicates that there is something that's worth investigating. Then, say the safety manager here will interpret these signals responsibly and will make a decision based on the safety policies. This brings us to an important mindset shift. Whether in healthcare or medical affairs, when working with clinical decision support system outputs, the most useful question may not be, is the system right or wrong? A better question is, what is the system trying to draw my attention to? Clinical decision support system is about prioritization of attention. It helps us to focus on what matters most when it matters most. That means that clinical decision support systems can be implemented in many different ways. Some systems are rule-based and follow predefined medical logic, such as guideline threshold or known contraindications, for example, but others are artificial intelligence driven tools and they learn patterns from large data sets. From an interpretation standpoint, the difference is less important than the intent of the output. And in both cases, the output should be treated as decision support, not a directive. Now, let's briefly talk about limitation, just enough to keep expectations realistic. Clinical decision support systems rely on data. If the data is incomplete, outdated, or biased, the output may be misleading because the system doesn't understand context the way humans do. It recognizes patterns, not meaning. And that's why human oversight, again, always matters, even when the technology is advanced. And in healthcare and medical affairs, responsibility never shifts to the system or to the technology. Accountability always remains with people. So how should we use clinical decision support system, especially at an awareness level? We can start by learning the language and understanding what alerts or flags and recommendations actually mean. Then we have to avoid overtrust and undertrust at the same time. So we don't blindly follow the clinical decision support system outputs, and also we don't totally ignore it from the beginning. We can use clinical decision support systems as a conversation starter with clinicians, with cross-functional teams in case of medical affairs, and within any discussion trying to reach a better solution for a case. As artificial intelligence becomes more embedded in healthcare, these type of systems will appear in more places. It will show up in clinical workflows, in evidence reviews, in safety monitoring, and also in population health analysis. So the goal of this session was just to help you understand the concept of the clinical decision support systems, what it is and what it is not, and how to interpret its outputs confidently. This is the foundation that allows you to engage with artificial intelligence tools responsibly and effectively. For more information, please see the lecture notes and the infographics attached to this session. Thank you very much for watching, and see you soon.